She texted me saying I got her pregnant from fingering and I had no idea what to do. She sent me a message saying she thought she was pregnant. And not from anything that should have made that even remotely possible. That is the kind of text that stops your entire day cold, because your brain just cannot figure out how to process what it is reading. Let me be very clear about something before we go any further. This is already one of the most confusing situations a person can find themselves in, and it is only just getting started. So here is the full picture. Our guy had been talking to this girl, something happened between them, and now out of nowhere she is convinced that she might be pregnant. The problem, and this is the part that had everyone in the comments absolutely losing their minds, is that what actually happened between them was not something that can result in a pregnancy. Biology is pretty firm on that point. And yet here she was, genuinely concerned, genuinely reaching out, and he had no idea what to do with any of it. You have to understand the specific kind of mental paralysis that comes with receiving a message like that. It is not just confusion. It is the feeling of the floor dropping out from under you while simultaneously trying to remember if you somehow slept through an entire chapter of middle school science. He read that message probably 2 or 3 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. They did not. He probably set his phone down, walked to another room, came back, and read it a 4th time just to confirm that yes, this was actually happening, and no, he had not imagined it. His first instinct was to just not respond. And honestly, who could blame him? When someone sends you a message that contradicts everything you learned in health class, your first reaction is not going to be calm and collected. It is going to be stunned silence. He sat with this for a while, probably staring at his phone trying to figure out if this was real, if she was joking, or if there was some genuinely wild misunderstanding happening here. Picture that moment. You are just going about your day, maybe eating lunch or watching something, and your phone buzzes with a message that just completely derails your entire understanding of a situation you thought you had a handle on. You put the phone down. You pick it back up. You read it again. You put it face down on the couch and stare at the ceiling for a while. That is exactly the kind of paralysis this text would cause in a reasonable person, and he sat in that paralysis for longer than he probably should have. There is no malicious intent in the silence. It is just the deer in headlights response that happens when your brain encounters something it genuinely has no template for. But eventually he posted about it, and the internet had a very clear and unanimous recommendation. Stop ignoring her and just have her take a pregnancy test. It sounds simple. It sounds obvious. But when you are the person actually in that situation, nothing feels simple or obvious. He had to figure out how to re-enter a conversation he had backed out of, how to do it without making things worse, and how to actually get them to a point where they could get a real answer. There is also something quietly uncomfortable about having to be the one to initiate that conversation back up, knowing full well that the silence had already done some damage. Every moment he stayed quiet was a moment she was sitting with her fear alone, and even if the fear was based on a misunderstanding, it was still real to her. That matters. The fact that her worry did not make scientific sense did not make her experience of that worry any less overwhelming, and he had to walk back into that with enough sensitivity to not make it worse. So he texted her back. He apologized for going quiet, which was a genuinely decent thing to do regardless of how bizarre the situation was. She had reached out because she was scared, and disappearing on someone who is scared is not a great look no matter what. The apology opened the door back up, they agreed to meet, and he drove to a pharmacy, bought 2 pregnancy tests, and tried to handle the whole thing like a functioning adult. 2 tests, not 1. Because if you are going to do this, you do it right. There is something quietly admirable about that decision. He could have bought 1. 1 would have felt like he was doing the bare minimum. 2 felt like he was taking it seriously, like he understood the weight of what she was feeling even if the logic of the situation made no sense to him. That small detail says a lot about who he is in moments that actually require him to show up. They went to the pharmacy together. He bought the tests. She went into the bathroom to take them. He waited outside, which is exactly the right call because that is a private moment and there is no reason for him to be standing in there making things more awkward than they already were. So he waits. He is standing in a pharmacy hallway, probably pretending to look at his phone, painfully aware of everyone walking past him and hoping none of them can tell what is happening 5 feet away. The fluorescent lights humming overhead. The faint smell of antiseptic and cheap plastic packaging. The sound of an automatic door sliding open every time someone walks in from the parking lot, letting in a quick burst of outside air before sliding shut again. Every second in that hallway feels longer than it should. He has nothing to do but wait and thinking is probably the last thing he wants to be doing right now. She finishes. She calls him in so they can wait for the results together. And this is where things take a turn that nobody saw coming. They are standing there in a pharmacy bathroom, waiting for results on a test for a pregnancy that should not scientifically be possible, and the minutes are ticking by. Almost 10 full minutes pass. The test is blank. Not negative. Not positive. Just completely blank. And she is staring at it trying to figure out why nothing is showing up. The confusion on her face is genuine. She is holding this test up, turning it slightly like maybe the angle is wrong, maybe the light is different from this direction, maybe if she tilts it just so something will appear. He is watching her do this and the silence between them is starting to get very heavy in a very specific way. Something is wrong, and neither of them has figured out what yet. Oh no. Oh no no no. Then she says it. She thinks she took it wrong. He asks how someone takes a pregnancy test wrong, because that is a fair question, the instructions are literally printed on the box. And she tells him. She forgot to take the white cap off the part you are supposed to pee on. She essentially peed on the cap of a pregnancy test and then wondered why it was not showing any results. He is standing there in a pharmacy bathroom absorbing this information in real time. There is a very specific kind of silence that follows a revelation like that. It is not an angry silence or a judgmental one. It is the silence of a person who is trying very hard not to let their face do something that cannot be taken back. He had to stand there, hold it together, and figure out what to say next while processing the fact that the last 10 minutes of his life had just been rendered completely meaningless by a plastic cap. He had to look at her, this person who was already stressed and confused and possibly a little embarrassed, and find a way to respond that was neutral and steady and did not make any of this worse than it already was. And here is what gets me about this moment. She did not have any idea. She genuinely did not know. This was not embarrassment or deflection. She looked at that blank test and sincerely could not figure out what went wrong. That tells you everything you need to know about the overall level of biology knowledge we are working with in this situation, and it actually reframes the entire premise of why she was worried in the first place. She was not being manipulative or dramatic. She was just operating with a deeply incomplete understanding of how things work. And in a strange way, that is almost more disarming than if she had been. It is very hard to be frustrated at someone who is genuinely, earnestly confused. There is no malice in her. There is just a person who needed more information at every single stage of this story, and somehow never got it until right now, standing in a pharmacy bathroom holding a test she used incorrectly. By the time this is all sorted out, she no longer has to go. So she takes the tests home with her, and he drives her back. He hands her 2 pregnancy tests and sends her on her way, which has to be one of the more surreal driving experiences a person can have. Just some quiet music playing, the awkward silence of 2 people who have just been through something genuinely strange together, and 2 unopened pregnancy tests sitting somewhere in the car between them. Neither of them is quite sure what to say. Maybe they make small talk about something completely unrelated just to fill the air. Maybe they do not. Maybe he turns the radio up just slightly so the silence has something to hide behind. He is focused on the road but also very much aware that the last hour of his life has been unlike anything he could have planned for. And then he drops her off, watches her walk inside, and drives home alone with whatever version of this story he is going to carry with him for a very long time. 2 hours later she sends him pictures of the results. Both negative. Exactly what anyone with a basic grasp of human reproduction would have predicted. He texts back something like, "Oh, okay, good." She likes the message. And just like that, it is over. No more texts. No more worry. Just two people mutually deciding through the power of a liked message that they are done communicating. There is something almost beautiful about that ending if you think about it. No long conversation. No drawn-out debrief. Just a liked message that functions as a mutual understanding, a handshake across the void of a very strange afternoon, two people agreeing without words that they have both seen enough of this situation and are ready to quietly move on with their lives. Now let us be real about what this story actually is. This is not a horror story. This is not a manipulation story. This is not some dramatic betrayal. This is a story about two people with a gap in their understanding of basic biology, one awkward pharmacy trip, one misused pregnancy test, and a resolution that came through exactly the kind of simple, direct action that the internet recommended. He did the right thing. He stopped avoiding it, he showed up, he bought the tests, and he waited for the truth. And the truth, as expected, was negative. What makes this story worth telling is not the drama of the situation, it is the absurdity of every single step along the way. From the initial text to the blank pregnancy test to the cap still being on, every moment in this story is just slightly more unbelievable than the last. And yet it is completely real, and it resolved in the most anticlimactic and perfect way possible. Here is the thing about how he handled it though. Some people might say he should have just explained to her from the beginning why her concern was not scientifically valid. And maybe that conversation would have helped. But realistically, that conversation was never going to go well. If she already believed what she believed, no amount of explaining was going to land cleanly. The pregnancy test was the only language that was going to work in that moment, and he was smart enough to figure that out. So what is the verdict here? This man is absolutely not the asshole. He got hit with one of the most unexpected texts imaginable, he froze up for a moment like any human being would, and then he came back and handled it with more maturity than most people would have managed. He apologized, he showed up, he bought the tests, he waited. And then when it was all over, he kept it simple and did not make it weird. He is fine. He is more than fine. He handled a genuinely strange situation with grace, and the story ends exactly the way it should. Clean resolution, mutual silence, and a liked message that says everything words could not. I made a dairy-free cake with eggs and somehow started a war at dinner. She was upset because I put eggs in a cake. Not because I burned it, not because it tasted bad, not because I forgot to bring it. Because it had eggs. And somehow that made the cake not dairy-free. I need you to stay with me here, because this one is going to require your full attention. So here is how this whole thing started. Our narrator gets invited to dinner at a friend's house. They have this long-standing tradition where whoever gets invited brings food. The host tells her a dessert would be great, but it needs to be dairy-free because the daughter has stopped eating dairy. No problem. She has a recipe she loves, one she has made many times before for exactly this kind of occasion, and it has no dairy in it whatsoever. No milk, no butter, no cream, no cheese, nothing from a cow in terms of milk products. She goes home, she pulls out her ingredients, she takes her time putting this thing together because she actually cares about doing it right. She makes it, she brings it, and the whole table loves it. People are going back for seconds, complimenting the texture, the sweetness, the way it holds together. The friend is asking for the recipe and writing it down on a piece of paper like it is something she wants to keep. It is a genuine hit. The kind of moment where you feel genuinely good about yourself as a guest, as a friend, as a person who showed up and contributed something real. This is the moment she should have been able to just feel good and go home. Then she gets to the eggs. The daughter hears eggs in the recipe and immediately becomes upset and runs upstairs. And here is where our narrator is completely blindsided, because she did not expect eggs to be a problem at all. She was asked for a dairy-free cake, and she made one. There are no milk products in this cake. Eggs are not dairy. That is just a fact, a simple and well-established one. Eggs come from chickens. Dairy comes from cows. These are different animals producing different things through completely different biological processes. A chicken does not produce milk. A cow does not lay eggs. The two have nothing to do with each other on any biological, nutritional, or culinary level. She was not wrong. But the friend does not see it that way. The friend looks her dead in the eye and says eggs are dairy. And not in a casual, I might be wrong about this kind of way. Not in a curious, questioning, let us figure this out together kind of way. In a firm, settled, you made a mistake and you should have known better kind of way. The kind of tone that does not leave room for discussion. Our narrator is now standing in someone else's kitchen, surrounded by dishes she did not cook, guests she only half knows, and a dessert she worked on, being told that something she has understood correctly for her entire life is actually wrong. That is a deeply disorienting experience. There is a very specific kind of confusion that comes from being confidently corrected about something you are completely sure of, and it is uncomfortable in a way that is hard to shake. Oh, we are going to have to unpack this one. She pushes back gently, because what else can you do? She explains, calmly and clearly, that dairy refers to milk and milk products. Things made from or derived from the milk of an animal. The friend doubles down without hesitation. She says dairy is anything that comes from an animal. And this is where things start to get philosophically chaotic in a way that the friend clearly did not anticipate, because our narrator immediately asks about honey. Honey comes from bees, which are animals. Is honey dairy? The friend says no, because bees are insects. So we have now arrived at a world where the definition of dairy depends entirely on a taxonomic distinction between insects and non-insect animals, a food science framework that exists nowhere in any nutritional literature, cookbook, allergen database, or medical guideline that has ever been written down. Let us just pause here for a moment and think about what that definition actually means if you apply it consistently. Meat would be dairy under that logic. Fish would be dairy. Gelatin would be dairy. Bone broth would be dairy. Every egg in every grocery store in every country would be filed under dairy, sitting right next to the milk and the yogurt and the cheese. The entire definition collapses the moment you try to use it in any real context, and yet this woman is standing by it firmly enough to let a dinner party turn cold and awkward over a cake that everyone had already eaten and genuinely enjoyed. Here's what I think actually happened in this situation. The daughter decided to stop eating dairy, which is a completely reasonable and personal choice that deserves to be respected. But somewhere along the way, either the daughter or the family developed the belief that dairy-free means no animal products at all. That understanding is actually the definition of vegan, not dairy-free. These are related but meaningfully different categories. Dairy-free means no milk or milk-derived ingredients. Vegan means no animal products of any kind, including eggs, honey, and gelatin. The friend conflated those two categories, applied the wrong standard to the request she made, and then when the cake arrived and turned out to contain eggs, the frustration and embarrassment of that mix-up got redirected entirely at our narrator instead of at the miscommunication that actually caused it. And our narrator apologized. She said sorry even though she did not do anything wrong. She made a dairy-free cake because she was asked for a dairy-free cake, and she delivered exactly that. She stood in that kitchen, absorbing an incorrect correction, processed the emotional weirdness of being made to feel like a bad guest for a dish everyone had praised 20 minutes earlier, and then extended an apology anyway just to bring the temperature down. The problem was not the cake. The problem was that the request and the expectation did not match, and nobody figured that out until the eggs came up in conversation. I feel for this woman so much it is not even funny. What makes this story so frustrating is the specific combination of being wrongly corrected and being expected to absorb that correction graciously and without protest. Our narrator was told she made a mistake. She pushed back thoughtfully and reasonably, offering a clear and accurate explanation. She was given a definition in return that does not hold up under even the most basic scrutiny. And then she apologized anyway, just to keep the peace, and walked away from that dinner knowing the friend was still sitting with some version of quiet resentment toward her. That is an exhausting and genuinely unfair position to be in. You did the right thing. You made a good cake. Everyone ate it and loved it. And somehow you are still the one going home feeling bad about the whole night. The verdict here is clear and it does not require much deliberation. Our narrator is not the asshole. Not even a little bit. She was asked for a dairy-free dessert and she made one. Eggs are not dairy. This is not a controversial position. This is basic food categorization that is reflected in every cookbook, every nutritional label, every dietary guideline, and every allergist's office on the planet. The friend was wrong. The definition she used was wrong. And the idea that a guest should somehow have anticipated a non-standard, self-invented definition of dairy and adjusted her recipe accordingly is genuinely unreasonable. The deeper issue here is that if the daughter has dietary restrictions that go beyond dairy, and it sounds like she might, then the right move is to communicate those restrictions clearly when making a request. If eggs are off the table, you say no eggs. If meat is off the table, you say no meat. You do not say dairy-free and then expect people to read between the lines and figure out that you actually mean something closer to vegan. That is not a fair standard to hold a guest to, especially a guest who was doing something kind by bringing food in the first place. And the fact that the friend stayed upset even after the apology is the part that sticks with me. Our narrator came to dinner, brought a homemade dessert, got the recipe wrong according to a definition that does not exist in any real food context, and still apologized to keep the peace. At some point the friend needs to take a step back and ask whether the frustration is actually about the cake, or whether it is about feeling like her daughter's needs were not respected, and then direct that energy toward the actual solution, which is a clearer conversation next time, not a silent grudge toward someone who brought them a cake they all enjoyed. Drop a comment below and tell me which story hit harder today, the pharmacy situation or the egg debate, because I genuinely cannot decide. If you made it this far, a like and a subscribe would mean the world.